Hello, my dear students. So, since this is our last class before your exam, I wanted to do a quick recap of what we've been doing in class so far, just to remind you of what you've learned, and then to prepare you for what you're going to do in class today and in your exam. That's three things: remind you of what you've learned so far, prepare you for our activity in class today, and then prepare you for your exam also. So, we'll begin with a definition of poetry. As you learned, poetry does not have a fixed definition like physics or biology, but there are some elements that make up poetry, and they are listed down here. So when you see a piece of writing that has all of this, it qualifies as a poem. So it has to have ideas and feelings expressed with intensity, the use of distinctive style, purposeful use of rhythm that reinforces key meaning, an elevated art form which prizes aesthetic qualities, a form of writing designed to be heard as well as read. So all of these qualities make up a poem, and from the examples you've seen so far, you will notice that these qualities are present. Now, you were also shown that poetry has evolved over time through the ages, right? So there's a very old poem here to show you how poems are written sometime in the past. Now, very importantly, we went on to the topics of for poems. What are poems usually about? And you were told that they can be about anything at all. If you can imagine it, you can write a poem about it. Anything at all. So far you've seen it, you've read a poem about mothers about mothers having to give up their day for their children. You read a poem about someone giving up his old self for a new personality. You also read about someone recalling their past when they used to pick berries as a child. All of these are possible topics in poetry, and you're going to read more poems with even more, different varieties of topics. So bear that in mind. Now we moved on to, the skills that you need to be able to read and analyze a poem. And you've been told that you need to read closely a range of poems. So you cannot read one poem and analyze. You need to read a wide range of poems. You also need to read sensitively. You need to read carefully to figure out what the poem is, implying, what deeper meanings are there. You will notice that we keep emphasizing that we need to be looking out for deeper meanings, because that's the whole point of literature. We don't only look at surface, because surface does not tell us anything at all. We are asking ourselves, why is it saying this? What is it trying to imply? What deeper meanings are there? Yes, then we need to analyze the ways that poets use language and structure. So far we've been looking at language, your personification, metaphor, and simile. They are all part of language, and you've seen so far how poets can use this to create certain effects, how they can use personification to bring objects alive and help you make an emotional connection to them, how they can use metaphors to create very unusual connections between two things that are not similar in any way. So then you also know that you need to use appropriate terminology in your essays, and then you need to gain confidence in giving informed personal responses when writing about poems. So we'll get to all this with time, but it's just good for you to be prepared to be aware of it. Now you also know that you need to be an active learner. If you don't know what an active learner is, I advise you to go back and read this. But it simply means that you need to learn to read every day, and you need to read and take notes at the same time. You don't read literature the way you read your normal novels. When you read, you need to write something down that will get you thinking about the deeper meanings of what you are reading. So active learning means reading very voraciously and writing when reading, taking notes, thinking very carefully about what you are reading. These are skills that will help you in literature. Now we moved on to reading for meaning, and this is where we began our actual study. And we learned from here that for you to understand the poem, you need to read closely, and then you need to read several times. So it's almost impossible for you to read a poem the first time and understand it. It hardly ever happens, except you've gotten to to a very advanced level. But at the stage that you are, for you to actually get what the poem is about, you need to read it over and over and over. In an exam situation, that would be about 4 times before you can actually confidently write about it. So, when reading a poem, there are things you should look out for. The content of the poem, what the poem is about, what's the general message, what's the main issue being explored in the poem, and then the words and sounds the poet uses to create certain effects. By now you know that if a poem is about a sad lover, for example, maybe someone that got heartbroken, that's what the poem is about. The words and sounds will reflect that feeling of being heartbroken. So they'll probably choose words that are that sound very sad, words that express deep sadness. So there's always a link between the words used, the sounds used, and the content of the poem. So it is your job as an analyst to look for the connection between the words and sounds and the meaning of a poem. Yeah. So we practiced with this. Now, after reading this poem the first time, most of us didn't actually get what was going on. But after having read it like 5-6 times, we understood that this was a poem about how parents have to give up their lives, their interests, for the sake of their children, right? And how even those children too, at some point, their own lives too will become like their parents' lives, right? So life is like a cycle. You are young one day with no care in the world, and then suddenly you're older and you have so much, things you're responsible for. So that's one of the things that poetry does. It explores all kinds of issues, right? So this was a good start for us to begin to see how poems, have deeper meanings. Now, to help us arrive at the deeper meanings, we had to do a few things. First of all, we had to figure out what the words mean. So it's always good for you when you read a poem and you don't fully understand it, pick out keywords that are obstructing your understanding and check what they mean. Then after that, we now drew a table to try and summarize what the content of each stanza is. That way we're able to gradually build to the overall meaning of the poem. So we understood what each part was about, and then we're now able to get a fuller picture. So that's also a good practice for you when reading a poem. Then we also try to look for the contrast between the two elements, the two main elements in the poem, the parents and children. How does the poet try to show their different experiences? That also helped us to understand the poem. So by activity 5, we had a fuller understanding and we were able to now make comments on the words that were used to convey certain ideas. Many of us struggled with this, but I know that we'll get better at it with more practice. So by the time we got to this activity, we actually had a better understanding of what the poem was about, both on a surface level and on a deeper level. Yes, then, okay, we skipped this one, but it's good for you to go back and read it. So that was to help us understand, how to read a poem. Read it over and over. Ask yourself what certain words mean. Try and figure out what the content of each stanza is, right? And try and figure out if there are any contrasts or similarities between different elements in the poem. Now moved on to exploring language and structure. And so far what we've done here is to look at the effect of metaphor, simile, and personification. And all of these are used to create imagery. So we read this poem about a man who's recalling his days of youth when he was younger and how he used to go pick berries. But you realize that this poem is actually more than about blackberries, that there are deeper meanings in here. And after having read the poem like 4 or 5 times too, we figure some of those things out. But our focus more was on how the poets used similes, metaphors, and personification, and they gave you examples, right? But from the video that you watched, you know that those things have specific effects, right? And those effects usually are, they are common to all the poems where they are used. So for example, this is a metaphor: red ones inked up. This conveys this vivid saturated red color of the berries, similar to red ink. So now you are seeing the link between the berries and red ink. Normally you will not make that connection, but the metaphor has forced you to make that connection, right? And what do they have in common? The way that red ink can stain you is the same way that the berries can also stain you, right? So the metaphor has brought out the connection, between these two dissimilar items or objects, right? So I know many of us also, had a challenge with this, but again, with more practice, we would get better. But what you need to understand is that for you to describe the effect of metaphor, personification, and simile, you need to think of, what unusual associations are being made, what emotional connections are being created, right? What images are being formed in your head, by that comparison. So your exam is going to be based on this, right? If I were you, I would go back and watch those videos again, and I will practice describing effects. So in our class today, all we're going to be doing is putting all of those effects together into a paragraph. So activity 6, or let me see. Activity 6 is what we're going to be doing in class today. So we're going to try and put our thoughts together into one paragraph that will describe the effect of some of the language used in this poem. So I'm going to write a brief summary for you. I'm going to write examples of where I describe effect, so that you can use that to spur you, get you thinking, and then you will write yours. So based on what you did today, I will know if you are ready for your exam or not. But whatever the case is, you're going to describe effect for me in your exam. So you're going to have a poem. What I've given you is a short part of a longer poem, from your anthology. You're going to read it very carefully. You're going to write a full, a one-page essay on what you think the deeper meaning of the poem is, what ideas have been explored in the poem. Then you will now tell me the effect of some of the language devices used. So I drew a box for you again. You will see some quotes. You see their names, personification, metaphor, simile, and so on and so forth. Then your job will be to tell me what the effects are. And like I said in the exam paper, I don't expect you to just rephrase the quote for me. Joanna, for example, is fond of saying the poet is showing us how it looks like. That's not effect. Is that okay? You need to tell us exactly what emotional connections, what strange associations, what images are being formed in your head. So I'll prepare the document and give it to you in class to help you put all your thoughts together. And I hope you're ready for your activity in class. See you later.